Well, today I'm here with Alycia Ramirez, and this is not a happy interview, but this is an interview that we must have. One of the things that I've always believed is that we have to personalize stories because a lot of times when we look at things, we're looking at them in the abstract. Should we have Medicare for all or not? That's sort of an abstraction. The reality, it is more than an abstraction. It has value to people and it affects people's lives materially. Welcome to Politics Done Right, Mrs. Alycia Ramirez. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. We got some sunshine out here, so it makes the day a little better.
So where are you located?
I live right outside Seattle. That's just easier for people to recognize because, when I say Seattle, everyone knows where it is. So this is where I'm from, the beautiful Pacific Northwest.
Okay, well, you are an immigration activist. Is that
hmm
correct?
Yes.
Well, before we get into the subject at hand, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you do?
So my husband is a DACA recipient who came here from Mexico when he was about 7. And that's actually the main reason I got into activism and then fell into immigration activism was ultimately to protect my own family and to bring awareness to what we go through in our daily lives, how these policies that come out of the government affect us. And along the way, I just became more involved and seeing kind of the trauma that people go through on a daily basis makes me want to fight even harder.
Now, you have any kids?
I do. I have a 5-year-old.
You have a
Yep.
five-year-old kid. And
Yes.
did I understand you to say your husband is a DACA recipient?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, let me ask you, before we get into the subject at hand, how does it feel with all the transitions that have occurred with the new president that we have?
It's it's really unfortunate that this happened, but if you look at his rhetoric of the president we have now, it's not a surprise at all. What's unfortunate is that a lot of the policies that have come out of the federal government have impacts that will last generations. For instance, the way our immigration court functions now is it's at the breaking point, and a lot of it is because they're overloaded from all of these cases that they're getting from people who are being picked up without, the only reason that they're there is because they don't have papers. And then what we're doing at the southern border, all of those things are going to be, they're going to be around for a really long time. And my ultimate goal is that people become aware of that so that when this president is out of office, will be motivated to keep fighting.
Well, excellent. Now, the reason that I contacted you is a friend of mine on Facebook sent a video that you put out there, and the video. I woke up this morning to that video in my inbox, and it was a touching video. And at first, it almost brought tears to my eyes. But secondly, it got me pissed off because what's occurring in this country, people just don't understand that there are people behind it. There are human
Mhm.
beings behind it, and it's life and death. And when it's your own, it means something. So, why don't you first tell me your story? Tell me the story about your mother-in-law from the beginning.
So my mother-in-law, she's always been sick. She has been sick since my husband was a kid. She had diabetes for many years, heart problems. She was under a lot of stress, which the doctors have said made her conditions even worse. And the last few years, we noticed a pretty serious deterioration in her health. She was very weak. She couldn't walk up the stairs without assistance. She would get out of breath a lot. She'd be in pain a lot. And that kind of got worse over the last 2 years. And she was told that was problem with her heart. She had some kind of blockage in there. And at first they told her, you should be fine. Just take these medications, and that should go away. Um, and she just kept getting worse
Let me stop you
and
there for a
worse.
second because that concerns me. You said that somehow she did a test. She went in for a test or something, and they
Mhm.
did find the blockage.
Yes, they did.
And after they found that blockage, and by the way, when she went into the doctor at that time, was she paying out of pocket or how was that handled?
So she is completely undocumented. She unfortunately just, because of her situation, just did not qualify for any kind of legal status. So that made her ineligible for things like Medicare or Medicaid, which income wise she would have qualified for if she were a citizen. So she was relying on charity care, clinics that will go by a sliding scale. She would just have family members write letters saying that, hey, we take care of her. She has no income. So that's really what she was relying on. She didn't have any kind of really specialized care or a cardiologist like she should have
Hmm.
had.
So, in other words, they told her that, well, we know you have a blockage. They really don't have the resources to stent her at that point in time or anything. So they just try
Mhm.
to medicate her
Yeah.
as best they could.
Yes.
But if she were a person going to a hospital, she would have had real care, and that
Right.
okay. I want there. Let me tell you where there are some people that are listening to, and remember, our audience it's not going to be just a friendly audience. So I want to remind our audience of something here. Those that are not very friendly, because your mother-in-law was an undocumented person. If somebody goes to France, if somebody goes to England, if somebody goes to these other countries, right? Whether they are citizens or of that country or not, and if they come down with something, guess what those systems are allowed to do? Take care of the persons. They're a humane system. They believe in humanity. So for those of you who are thinking, well, she's from somewhere else, remember how many Americans have been to Panama? How many Americans have been to France and all these other places and had gotten care without having been to be a citizen or resident of that country? Reciprocity, one would believe, is something we could offer. Please continue, Mr. Ramirez.
Yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, they basically tried to see if that would solve the problem over time, and of course it didn't. And with her being, she also did not speak English very well. So
Mm-hmm.
on top of that, there is a language barrier there. So she's relying on other relatives or friends or staff to translate for her, which I'm sure also create gaps in her care. Um, After a while, she would just get so sick that putting laundry in her, putting a little laundry in would cause her to get really bad pains in her chest. And finally, on New Year's Day, she called my husband and told him she needed to go. She was going to the emergency room because she was very afraid. She was having a lot of pain. She was afraid she could die. So we rolled her into the emergency room. They admitted her that night for stenting, and we visited her the next day. She was in a lot of pain, and said our goodbyes, and um, we went home. And my husband got a call that morning about probably 6 o'clock saying her heart had stopped during the night. She had slipped into a coma, and her chances of survival had dropped quite significantly. And she passed away within about 24 hours. She was gone. And what is angering to me and some of the family is that we found out after the fact that there were so many holes in her care. She didn't have a cardiologist, which was insane for how sick she was at the time. The doctors kind of just seemed to be shuffling her along and just giving her medication after medication. They weren't treating the problem, and she wasn't able to get good care because she was uninsured. And there are just so many things that went wrong along the way that if she would have gotten the proper care, she would have gotten the cardiologist, she might be here today. And that's what really enrages me a lot when I hear, especially the discussions against Medicaid for all, is that there's a human cost to that, and no one should have to go through that. No one should have to um, gamble with their lives. That's not right.
And the sad thing is that this didn't occur overnight. This is something that had been going
Yeah,
on for years. In other words, there were so many places along the way that this could have been mitigated long time ago, and just having her go in and out. I mean, I think you take a look at how in this country we treat dogs and we treat pet pigs and we treat all these other animals. You wonder why is it that we can't treat human beings with a little bit more dignity. Now, tell me, how did your mother-in-law get over here, and how long has she been in this country?
she came. I think she came in the mid to early '90s.
Hmm.
Um, so she had about 9 kids. So the older ones came first, and then she went back for the younger ones a few years later. Um, Around the late '90s is when she got the rest of the younger children and
Hmm.
crossed with them. So she'd been here for a really long time. She'd been in like a child care maid before that. Like she was took care of people's children. She was a nanny. She did a
Hmm.
lot of those kind of jobs for many years until she just couldn't work anymore because of her health was so bad.
Now, if I understand it correctly, she came over here. She did a lot of those jobs, and she was never a burden to
No.
society. She actually took care of herself and her family with the jobs that she was doing, and probably did it on at a rate that was lower than many others, which means whereas people have a tendency to believe, and this is where we get into your immigration activism, where people tend to believe that immigrants are a net positive, I mean, net negative on the country. The reality is the mere fact that they work for wages that are less than what American propers would work for. They stimulate the economy as these people that use them can actually go off and do some other things. Isn't that correct?
Right, yeah, and she raised all those children by herself alone. She had to work 3, 4 jobs. That is what she did. And the thing that most people don't realize is undocumented immigrants do pay taxes.
A
Uh,
lot.
yes, they do.
And
They
they
just
play
don't.
what's
Yeah.
on what they don't what and I sorry to cut you, but it drives me crazy. I'm an immigrant from Panama, Central America. It drives me crazy because what most people don't understand is those folks that come over here find that they have to work that much harder for that much less when coming to this country. And yes, the taxes that they pay are what's called regressive taxes, sales taxes, and name
Mhm.
the rest. You know them quite well.
Right, and there is, remember what the number is. So the government actually gives undocumented workers what's called, I think it's an ITIN number, if I'm
Mm-hmm.
correctly, which is basically just a number to pay taxes. It's a
Mm-hmm.
tax code number. So they pay quite a bit into, like, millions and millions of dollars into the system. They just don't get anything back because they're not citizens.
What a lot of people don't understand as well is that illegal. Hear me about to mention that word that should never come. Undocumented workers actually are a great sustenance to the Social Security system because they are paying in a hell of a lot of money from a whole lot of employers that are putting that in, and they will never ever take out Social Security. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's the sad part, and I think it's not convenient for some people to talk about that because it takes away from the kind of the propaganda of immigrants are a burden, which is what we're hearing a lot of, unfortunately, with the administration and the rhetoric that we currently have. And they do, for instance, when my husband was undocumented before DACA, he paid taxes every year and got nothing back. And I'm really hoping that with this Medicaid for all and this kind
Medicare
of
for all.
Medicare for all that and this kind of broad now talk about immigration, people will start to realize that these two things are not only interconnected, but there's so many myths around both.
I mean, it's interesting because what folks don't understand when folks are talking, trying to put a negative on policies like Medicare for all, they would say, "Oh well, we want to keep undocumented workers out. They want you to be a citizen, as if you have measles if measles decide what, if you're in the United States and have measles, if it decides what nationality you are before it spreads from one to the other, it is sort of a what's the word that one would want to use? Ignorant to sit
Mhm.
back and believe that healthcare is not a national problem for everybody within that sphere. In other words, it should have very little to do with immigration or anything like that. If you have an immigration problem, let the immigration problem be solved, but it shouldn't cross over into healthcare or whatever, because again, measles or these different diseases know not whence they came from.
Right. And speaking of healthcare, the really sad thing about that is it's really kind of become, our healthcare system is so bad that it's become now kind of a public health crisis in itself. For instance, I know people who are diabetic and are rationing their insulin because they can't afford, for whatever reason, to pay the ridiculously high amount it is for their dosage for the month. And or people like me who, for instance, I got sick with a bad flu, for instance, last year, and just the doctor visit alone put quite a hole in our
Budget.
budget for the month, and because I'm not insured, and what happens with me is when I am prescribed medication when I get sick, is I find myself having to cut back on the dosage because I just can't afford the full dose, and
Let,
that's
let's
not good.
explore let's explore that. Are you saying that right now at this point in time you're uninsured?
Yes, I do not have insurance. I've been insured for, I believe, the last 2 years. We're one of the people that got priced out and pushed out of the healthcare exchange. It just, I mean, it's gone up. I think in the last 2 years, our premiums have gone up 40%,
Right.
and we were barely able to afford it before it jumped 2 years ago.
So nobody in the home is insured at this point in time?
The only one that's insured is my son, and that is because for our state, what we call Medicaid for kids, which is Apple Health, has a higher threshold for income level.
Right.
And with that, we're just barely hanging on, and by barely, I mean we barely made, like, we're just at the level where it would be the cutoff. And for me, I'm currently going without insurance, which is really hard when you have a condition that you have to monitor for the rest of your life.
And can you, is that something you can mention?
Yeah, so I have hypothyroidism because my body doesn't produce enough of the thyroid,
Mm-hmm.
which is a pretty manageable thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when you don't have insurance and getting to the doctor is very expensive, it can be very hard to manage. Um, for instance, when I have to go get checkups, I'm supposed to go twice a year, and I'm finding myself having to go once because a doctor visit for me without insurance is about $150, and that's a big chunk of change.
Right. I mean, and that is a sad thing because by you not getting your regular checkups, by you not taking the amount of medication that you're supposed to take, it means that this lack of that hormone is having a negative effect on other organs of yours. Is that correct?
Um, I wouldn't know at this point, and I wouldn't be surprised, but
Mm-hmm.
like, I am lucky that it's not a fatal disease. I don't
Right.
have something that could kill me.
Right.
But I could get. I mean, it does affect my life if it gets out of hand, and which is frustrating because I didn't choose this,
Right.
and no one chooses to be a diabetic, and no one chooses to have heart disease, and you're basically, the insurance companies are basically gambling with your life, and that's not right.
It's the entire system that is gambling. I mean, it is a shame. Now, you mentioned the price of medication and taking less than normal. Just a few weeks ago, we did a blog post and a program where we found out that insulin hasn't changed in over 100 years,
Mhm.
and the price of production has not changed. In fact, with the magnitude with scales, it should be cheaper. It turns out that they just decided that they needed to increase the price by 1,700%. A vial that used to cost $21 now costs $300.
Right. And that's part of corporate greed, and why, for instance, the Purdue family is now being sued is because there is no, we don't have currently any oversight that's regulating this. It's just these big pharma companies, the insurance companies are, calling the shots, which is where a lot of the propaganda against this push for Medicare for all comes from. It's not in their best interest to have a public health system because they lose a lot of profit.
You know, Alicia, it's even a little bit more demonic than that, in that these people actually knew that these drugs, these, what is it called? The drugs that these people are addicted on in throughout the country, the opioids, they
Mhm.
actually knew that the opioids were addictive. They attempted to sell it as not addictive. And then one of these companies decided to say, we can sell these things that are addictive and then sell the drugs that help get them off of their addictive state. Is that evil?
It is. It is evil, and for me, it makes me very angry. There was actually an article that came out that made me so angry that I immediately took out my computer and started writing because the article was about Subsidies, the company
Mm-hmm.
that made Subsidies, and it had come out that the company that made Subsidies, the same thing as Purdue Family, knew it was dangerous. They knew it was killing people. It killed 900 people. It was responsible for their death in some way, and yet we're pushing. Like they even made like this was what enraged me the most. They even made a rap song to promote this drug in their company, bragging about titrating, which is basically titrating is increasing the dosage when the
Right.
doctor gradually increases your dosage. That's for me that's enraging because I have known people who my age who have gotten addicted to drugs like this, to the heavy narcotic drugs, and got hooked on heroin, and some of them died that way.
Right.
So for me, when I see things like that, it makes me so angry and enraged to
Well, I
think
mean,
that they're laughing at the deaths of people that I've known, that I've grown up with, who got hooked on their drugs and died because of consequence.
well, that is a state of our economic system. You know, remember our economic system is designed to maximize profit for those who have capital. So, I mean, that is just where we stand right now. And until we change that, and the only way we change that is to have the stories of real people out there come out where it actually affects them. Because when you hear it on MSNBC or CNN or Fox or whatever, it sounds like this abstraction that everybody is looking at and not realizing what happens. And then when it happens to any one of these particular people, then somehow we can get the change that we know we should have. So, Ms. Ramirez, why don't you tell me a little bit about what I am? First of all, I'm sorry to hear about your mother-in-law. What do you intend to do going forward? I mean, that video was a good start as far as you entering now from being just an immigration activist to now also being a Medicare for all advocate and activist. What's your goal going forward?
Um, Ultimately, I know it's too late for her, but it's not too late for someone else, and that's something that I ultimately one of the reasons why I decided to finally come out about this was because stories can be powerful and they can change lives. And what I plan on doing is kind of the same thing I've done for immigration is just keep talking about it, keep having the public discussion on Medicare for all, why we need it, just talking as much as I can about it, getting other people to tell their story, because stories are infectious. Words are powerful when they're coming from, the people around you, and ultimately, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful to see a system that we will have Medicare for all the next 10 years, and I really want to be a part of that movement to make it happen, and I'm determined to do that. And I know that my mother-in-law would be proud of me right now. And I'm sorry, it's kind of an emotional topic, but ultimately, I really wanted to make sure what happens to my family does not happen to another family.
Miss Alicia Ramirez, that was very important for people to hear. Yesterday, I interviewed a young lady who said, I asked her for some advice as far as how can we make a difference, and I said, make the statement for activists, and she said, Egberto, let me tell you something. It's not about making the statement for activists because we all have to be activists. And you are proof positive that the day after she tells me that, you have turned your tragedy, you have turned your story into a story for us all. And I want to thank you so kindly for coming on with me at this late time, coming on with me just on a whim after doing your video, because your story means a lot to a whole lot of people because that has been replicated. Your story is a story that's been replicated over and over again. And until Americans realize that this is the reality that many are living through, nothing is going to change. So thank you so kindly for having been with Politics Done Right to let us know your story and to
Thank
make
you.
this story a story for all of America to hear.
Thank you for having me. I really, I'm hopeful that someone will hear this and will be touched to also act. And ultimately, that's my goal throughout everything I do is to touch the people around me because, a little ripple turns into a big wave eventually if there is enough.
You're absolutely right. Alycia Ramirez, thank you very much. Thank you so kindly for having been with us.
Thank you.